Clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Yeah, not going to spend a lot of time at your Arizona house during the summer. Come on, Brian. What's the point of even having it? Arizona's great in the summer.
Yeah, it's a little warm. Isn't it funny how we think about that and like it's just so reversed down there? Like we live for the summers in Oregon and the Northwest, and then down there they just go because it's just so hot. Like nobody goes outside. If you do, it's after dark. And even then it's like 95. It's just a very different scenario.
Even in the summer here, it cools down at night usually. And I was talking to somebody who he has an engineering firm in Eugene, but he has a lot of clients in Arizona. And he goes down there and he had to visit one time in the summer. And the guy that he was visiting, his client at his house, the air conditioning was on in the summer and it's 86. And he was just like sweating. And he's like, it's pretty hot in here still, right? And they're like, oh, I got used to it. And you got to put like stuff over your car. You got to put like a towel over your steering wheel. Otherwise it'll burn your hands. I mean, that doesn't seem fun.
They say too, you have to put like a 5-gallon bucket of water inside your house if you're not there because it dehydrates everything. So yeah, interesting things you learn.
That's crazy.
Well, it's Memorial Weekend. God bless the troops, the people who gave their ultimate sacrifice to America because we get to live in democracy, because of these people that died for us. And I think that is also the weird time of session where you come back and it's full on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from the day after Memorial Day until somehow we land the plane, which I don't know. We might crash the plane based on what we saw with second chamber deadlines and stuff. I got a feeling that the plane is a little rocky right now. Aren't you getting that sense?
I think that you can land a plane and it can, you've seen like Mission Impossible or something like that. It can have no wings. It could maybe not even have any landing gear left.
Mm-hmm.
Might be split in half, but it'll land. Yeah,
we have to by the 25th or 26th.
29th. It's funny. We got a calendar invite from the speaker's office for June 30, and I politely declined, saying we're not coming for that floor session.
Oh,
absolutely not. Nope.
It's interesting. I really think that we're going to probably come to a consensus, but I think the reality is that there's going to be a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans very grumpy about how this thing ends. And I'm not sure which ones, but I'm definitely thinking there's going to be some grumpiness coming out of this because I think you have a lot of things playing. You have a lower than expected budget. So you have a lot of like stuff that legislators put in that they wanted to get funded that's just going to die because they're just not going to fund it. They're going to try to keep everything to the blocking and tackling of government, which we could argue is wasteful spending. But I think you got that coupled with probably a lot of policy bills that everybody kind of wants to move that are just kind of quietly just dropping off the edge of the cliff right now. And it seems to make people grumpy. And then I think we tend to end up arguing over smaller things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's just because the other stuff is gone. So let's argue about this.
It's all that's left. I mean, we have to argue about something and we're just going to argue about what's left. I think one of the good things about this is a good budget to reset people's expectations post-COVID. Not only do you not have the immense amount of COVID cash, but now you have a threat from the federal government to not have even some of the stuff you normally rely on. And then you have this added benefit of Democrats, well, not necessarily benefit, but Democrats going out there saying basically, well, they're thumbing their nose at the president when it comes to diversity and education. They're renaming DEI. Have you seen this?
I haven't seen it.
So there's let me see if I can find it, but they've basically started renaming when they go out to hire the DEI positions. It's now it's instead of diversity, equity, and inclusion, It's belonging, equity, and something else. And so it spells out B. I'll find it real quick.
That's funny. But because they can't give up equity.
Well, they can't.
Everything relies on equity.
Absolutely. Yeah. They have to have equity. There's nothing they can do. They can't get anything done without equity. Belonging, equity, and engagement.
Oh.
So totally different. I'm sure that no one will be able to do the search on the find and replace and figure out where all the equity stuff.
It's just dumb. You know what I've noticed, though, is in some of this stuff, I've seen a lot of like news articles that used to use a lot of the DEI stuff have been changing. If you notice, like the reporters they're not writing as lefty as they were, so that I think there's subtle changes when you have President Trump in office. I think it does change the tone a little bit. Of course, I was just blasting Dan Rayfield on X about, please come back to Oregon and fight crime instead of playing politics in New York City.
Well, and you have all these companies that are about to change normally in June, they're going to change their logo to be the pride flag, right? Yeah. How many companies are going to still do that? How many of them are going to do it, more subtly? How many companies are going to punch it up because they want to be anti-Trump? I mean, this is the first June or the first Pride month since Trump has been elected. So that I think will be fascinating to watch. Maybe they won't change their profile on X where the conservatives are, and they will on Blue Sky where all the liberals are. I mean, there will be some fascinating social media strategies on that, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun June, Reagan. I think we're in for a fun time coming out. Well, on this Friday, I think which you should do, maybe we can start with just what's your quick take on the election results? I mean, bunch of nothing burger. I mean, the Portland Public Schools passed, which was such a bummer. But you look at the budget passed, but it was a continuing budget. Those tend to be a little bit, it wasn't a new bond. It was like a renewal bond, right? And I believe those tend to pass a little bit better, but it was carried by all the people in the deep, deep blue, downtown portions of Portland, and then it didn't pass in all the other areas. But I think the key was, somebody said this to me, and of course she's a Democrat consultant, and she would hate it if I said her name, but that she talks to me probably. But she was saying the real issue though is these things used to pass 70-30, and now it barely passed 54-46. So I think you're seeing a real shift, and a lot of stuff outside of here is not passing. So outside of Portland and stuff just aren't really passing. School board races, there wasn't really a whole bunch out there. I think they were pretty predictable. And I think what it showed is Republicans definitely didn't turn out in these like local school board races, and you still had the same kind of older white liberal Democrats that showed up and vote.
Yeah, people forget that you have the really young voter, which is sort of changing a little bit, but for the most part in Oregon, they're still liberal. And then you have the really old voters, and those are actually still predominantly Democrat leaning as well. I like to call them our not totally reformed hippie crowd. They're still out there. They are still a Democrat leaning constituency as well. Republicans do better in the 35 to 55 range. It's when you get above 55, you actually start trending much more left. And so at least that's kind of generally what I've seen. I'd say that's generally accurate. Depends on the region you're in. Obviously that'll change, but yes, I think you're right. I think the bonds and the levies, especially new bonds and new levies, really do bring out those fiscal conservatives. But like in Lynn County, our school board races, they were not the result that we had seen over the last two cycles, but those were inflated results because 2021 was the year when we were trying to reopen schools and a lot of schools were still shut down. Yeah. And so that carried a lot of conservative momentum into those races. And then in 2023, I think there was still some holdover and some hangover from COVID that helped conservatives. And we've kind of dropped back into that reset, which is unless you have really good get out the vote, unless you have really good candidates, unless you have money, it's really hard to win those races. And even then, if you've got all three of those things, if the unions and the other folks get their machine running, they're still hard to beat. They are still difficult to beat. And especially with this really depressed turnout. I mean, Republicans did not show up in Lynn County despite, a lot of mail that we sent. We did texting, we did calls. There just wasn't an overarching thing to push them to vote. And I think that's what we need to develop on our side is we need a better narrative on education. We need a plan on education. And then we need a better, which is just, we need this for every election. We need better get out the vote and better investment in that. And we need people on doors. I think that's the one thing the unions can put out regardless. They can snap their fingers and have 50 to 100 people at a door knocking event for school boards even. And we can't produce that. We don't have that type. We don't have that kind of energy and organization. I think we could, but it requires a lot more time and investment than these guys who are getting paid to do it. And they're going out there and they're getting, support from that front. So that's just something we got to work on as a party.
21% voter turnout in Lynn County.
Well, and it was bad because we still came in late, but normally we're supposed to swamp the Democrats by a much bigger margin late, and we didn't do that. I mean, I think the breakdown, the turnout will show about 55% was Democrat, 45% was Republican, and that shouldn't be the way it is in Lynn because Lynn has a much heavier Republican tilt. But Democrats, Lynn County Democrats and the OEA split their endorsements, and so that allowed us to win one and almost win a second race without even a Republican candidate in that race. So,
and I would say, I didn't do any school board races this cycle, so that's part of the reason why maybe the Democrats won.
Yeah, that's right, 100%.
I was engaged in 23, flipped a few boards around, but we didn't do anything in 25. I was too busy here in the building.
That's my problem too. Is I was able to get
well in 23 I had time, because the Senate Republicans walked out, so we could spend time. I think we were noodling around. We were noodling around with school board races because all the Republicans were here, and we would
remember
just
the days when Republicans had leverage in the legislature.
Yeah, right. When we walk out, I doubt there's any walkout happening this time. I don't know. Do you think any side walks out? I just say no. There's just.
I think that the only possibility is in the Senate, and the Democrats have to do something really egregious, and I think that they know better, and so I would say it's really. I think ultimately they don't have the guts to bring anything really hard. They don't want to risk. This is the one thing that I've always really respected Governor Kotek about when she was speaker is she knew just how far to move the ball without pushing the envelope so far that the backlash happened, right? Yeah. They knew just how high to raise the taxes, which they didn't raise the taxes a ton. They knew just how far to push business and regulations and guns without getting the immense kind of 2010 style backlash. And so that's that careful management, which is not something you see in other states. And I think that's why. You saw the Minnesota Democrats, they got majorities in 2022. They basically did every single thing that Oregon did over a 20-year span in one session. Yeah. And now the Senate went Republican and they're splitting the House again. So when you go aggressive, you tend to get that backlash. And so what they've carefully managed is how far they progress each time, which is why you actually see these progressive groups always mad at the Democrats because they're like, you need to be doing more. Look at what they're doing in this state. Look at what they're doing in this state. Well, you know what they're not doing in that state? Losing their Democrat majorities. They're not doing that here. That is happening in these other states because of the backlash of too much change at once. And so that's the thing you have to respect about Democrats in the state is they've had people in place that carefully manage that. And as long as they continue to do that, they probably get to keep their majorities. If they go too far, and that's the risk they're at this session, is Peter Courtney's not there to hold things back. Even Kotek's iron fist isn't felt so much in the House. And so the chairs in both chambers are starting to be like, oh, this is what it like when you're not wearing, iron handcuffs. And so they're starting to be like, what if I just run this bill out? Or what if I run that out? Yeah. And then the moderates in their caucus are going, what in the world is happening? Where are these bills coming from? And they're going to their leaders going, why are you letting control of the chamber get away from you? And they're, I think they're kind of hemming and hawing around about, this and process and have you considered this? And so the moderates are in kind of a tough spot right now. They're trying to decide what they can kill without getting punished too hard. And they're kind of sharing the workload. I think in the House, they're always up. And so they always have to be careful. In the Senate, I think the moderates that just got elected are going to take more of the brunt, and they're going to try to take the heat off the moderates who have to run again. Right. And I use moderate, that term very lightly, because those guys are pretty much lock, stock, and barrel Democrats on most issues, but it's on the really egregious stuff that they're there trying to tame it down a little bit.
Well, and I think we're, for the most part, on the Senate side, lock, stock, and barrel Republicans too, right? So I mean,
absolutely.
It is fairly tame on the Senate side. I think there's no way Senate Republicans walk out on any level. I don't think there's enough there for anything that would make them walk out. I think that House Republicans are, and House Democrats, I think their houses are a little divided, I think, amongst their caucuses right now, from what I'm hearing. So, which doesn't mean that they won't come together and coalesce around, bills or things here at the end. That tends to happen just because you just do it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you just kind of coalesce back to where your safe zone is. And so Republicans will do that in general, and the Democrats will do that in general. But I do think there's some more crankiness. There's some more options for problems coming out of the House than there is the Senate at this point going forward. I'm not sure. I can't really predict what it could be. I think transportation package still has a lot. We're going to get into this next week with transportation, but I mean, I think that has some opportunity for some blow up. I think there's enough bills that's kind of roaming around the world of the House committees that could have potential for blow up, but I'm still not seeing a whole bunch that's going to make me freak out. I think there's a few things I don't like, but they're not just horribleness, right? So the wildfire thing is kind of interesting. I think that's an interesting approach that the House Democrats did, is hold that thing in House rules and not pass that to the floor and pass it when it was literally Senator Golden's bill to get rid of his wildfire maps. What's your take on that one? Because I think that's a very interesting move for them to hold that one in rules.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, they know it's a bill that Republicans would really like to have. They would really like to fix the wildfire maps. And that's correct. We should repeal the wildfire maps. We should do Senate Bill 83. It is a good bill. Jeff Golden ran a bill with all the great Republican ideas and almost none of his, which is how you know it's a good bill. And now it's being held for leverage. And of course they do that. Of course they would take one of the most important bills of session and hold it. And the reason they want to hold it is they want wildfire funding. And so right now the governor's gone out and said we should steal the kicker. And then her people had to come behind her and revise that to only steal the rich people's kicker. So they really want to, they have this idea in their head. You got to get 4 House Republicans and 2 Senate Democrats to do that, because it's a 2/3 vote, not a 3/5.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was one of the best things Oregonians ever did. Was at the suggestion of Tim Knope, maybe have a 2/3 vote on that instead of 3/5. And so that's a really hard threshold to hit. And so I would say it's really unlikely that Republicans do that. They're considering lots of other things to try to get that revenue for wildfire. And I think all of those things are more likely to be palatable with Republicans than stealing the kicker. I think that one starts to get really dicey really fast. It lights people up really fast. If you want to cause yourself problems, steal the kicker. These other ideas, I think they're all arguable, right?
Yeah.
If the taxes are going up, you can make some arguments about why it should be this revenue source versus this one and all that stuff. Because ultimately, I think I do still see a lot of even Republicans frustrated with the road quality. And so I think there's a lot of room for negotiation and debate. And I think the one thing that Republicans really need to do, and I'm hearing a little bit that they're doing, is they're actually just going straight to the PCPs and laying it out and saying, here's your options. We've got the really bad option and we've got the less bad option. Do you want us to go full on no, or do you want the less bad option? And I think that's a good idea. We should make the arguments on these policy things and let them see what the actual debate is. Because a lot of them in the same position would go, oh, I understand why you're doing that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they have to love it, but I think it prevents the kind of, well, we're going to primary all these guys and all these guys are just rhinos and whatever. It's like, well, have you seen the hand we've been dealt? Okay. The hand is garbage. It's a garbage hand, but you can even play a garbage hand pretty well and stay in the game.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know any poker analogies. I'm thinking I played rook, hearts, you can get a really bad hand in hearts. Maybe you can, I think it's spades. Or maybe it's hearts. Which is the game where the queen of spades costs you like 13 points. You can sluff that and have somebody else take it, right? And so you take a few points, but they took more, right? That's the idea. We've got a bad hand, It was dealt because the dealer is a criminal, is controlled by the Democrats, and so you're getting dealt this bad hand, but we can still play it well. And that's what I think the Republicans are trying to do, is trying to play a bad hand well. And so, you gotta give them space to see if there's a way to play that hand well. Maybe there isn't. And if there isn't, then we need to back away from that stuff. But that's the point with Senate Bill 83 is that's a good bill. But if you make it that you have to have it, of course they're going to be able to leverage you on it.
Yeah.
So, and knowing that
it's
bill
only a good bill because they passed a bad bill,
right?
I mean, that's the reality too. Like
Democrats' fault.
Don't you think if you're a Republican, I think what I would do is just like, you know what, Democrats, hold it. Go ahead. Don't send that to the floor.
Yeah.
If you want to be the ones that don't repeal the wildfire maps, it's on you. You pass it in the first place. Go ahead and kill it. I would just call their bluff.
That's what I would do too, because the person who needs that bill the most isn't Senate Republicans.
No.
It's not House Republicans. It's, I would say, the governor and definitely Jeff Golden.
Jeff Golden, because we're coming after him down there on this map issue alone. This is the issue that Jeff Golden is going to stake his candidacy on, and it's going to be the issue that we stake our candidacy on against him. Yeah. And if you don't let it go through, and you let him have to stand there and basically say his party screwed him, you've pretty much just given us that seat.
Jeff, just let Jeff Golden negotiate for you.
Yeah.
House and Senate Republicans say, if the president and the speaker, if you want this bill to pass, please meet with our lead negotiator on Senate Bill 83, Jeff Golden.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I don't know. I in my mind on that one, the Democrats need it more than Republicans do, because we didn't pass it in the first place.
Nope.
They're the ones passing the repeal. So, of course, we're going to vote to repeal because it was a bad bill. But we don't need it. They need it.
Also, I heard a rumor that it's going to cost a ton of money for the Oregon Department of Forestry to process all of the appeals on the maps. They're going to need to spend
it's insane.
A huge chunk of change.
Insane.
So, and I mean, they
I put in for an appeal already on my map. I mean, they literally one half of granted, all my fields are irrigated.
Yeah.
But one half of the fields are in the wildfire map and the other half isn't. And it's
low
like, how
versus
did you
moderate
make that?
or high hazard. Yeah.
It's
totally
completely stupid. So
it doesn't make sense. It's like redistricting, right? Where you're like, well, if you stand on this side of my house, I'm not in the district. But if you stand on this side of it, you are in the district. So absolutely.
So funny.
You put this link in here, and I just think that this is absolutely crazy. A Molalla counselor was arrested for financial issues with a local PAC. So if you're a treasurer of a PAC, you probably should read this. I'll put a link in the show notes for it.
Yeah, right.
After nearly 10 months of investigation, 10 months. Maybe this is why it takes the Secretary of State so long for our campaign finance complaints. Molalla City Councilor Raylyn Botsford was arrested May 13th for alleged financial irregularities as her duties as treasurer of Molalla River Middle School Parent Action Committee. That's a healthy name for that PAC there.
Yeah, right.
She has she's a city councilor, right? So she has a role in the government. So the local police department didn't want to investigate her. They asked Canby to do it, and they concluded $20,000 in missing funds for a Molalla PAC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of money. 24 total charges, including multiple felony charges. And the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office says that she had a debit card for the PAC and was responsible for submitting all the financial reports. So basically they're saying she had full control of what was going on. Doesn't matter. Like I'm a director on some PACs. You're a director on some PACs, I'm sure. We have no idea what they're doing. They don't send us a report. They're up there. Our name's just on it, right? And that's going to change with campaign finance reform because only each person can only have really like one PAC. But we're not the one that is the main person in charge. We're not the one that's liable. That's basically what they're saying here. Is that so
but for a small little PAC like that, it's like $20,000 to go disappearing. It's just nuts.
Yeah.
And I think I'm glad they caught her. I think that shows that there is some, I think, PAC reform that needs to happen, and I think that's definitely important. But But the Clackamas County stuff just seems to be going nuts right now. Like, did you see that other one in Clackamas County with the lawyer for Melissa Fireside? Like, basically threatened Commissioner West to stop talking about Melissa Fireside's theft case.
Yeah, which reminds me, I need to send an email to Commissioner West and ask him to come back on and talk about Melissa Fireside.
And they didn't even give us the Oregonian wrote an article, and then of course they don't. They said you appeared on a podcast, which was our podcast.
Excuse me, and this is the difference between the Oregonian, which is really a declining institution here, and OPB, which not only do they know who Crosstabs is, they actually link to us in their new article, Grand Old Podcast, which is a great title. Good one, job. Dirk. I don't think Dirk writes the title, so he probably doesn't get the credit for that. Okay. But I do think it's a good one. And it covers, Oregon Doge. It covers the Star Chamber. He had to hurriedly add On the Verge because he apparently forgot On the Verge. Back to Basics with Jeff Helfrich. He plays a clip from Senator DBS talking about his No BS with DBS podcast, supposedly coming soon.
Yeah.
I don't know when it's going to come out, but there's a situation. But I wanted to read what he wrote about us. Dirk, of course, friend of the pod. He's been on.
We don't care about those other ones. Let's talk about us.
Absolutely. Republicans now dominate the Oregon legislative podcast market that they'd already had an edge in. Even before the current glut of audio content, GOP legislative staffers Reagan Knopp and Brian Iverson had been producing their own podcast, Crosstabs, for about a year. The show is more free-willing than those from sitting lawmakers, which is really just them saying we're more fun, and doesn't shy from campaign speculation or political gossip. And then you have a great quote here. Entertaining is as important as substance when you do podcasts. Iverson, who is married to Republican State Rep Vicky Breeze Iverson, Republican from Prineville, which again, you're the chief of staff for Dick Anderson. You are a well-known political consultant, and he goes with nepotism. He's like, well, he's married to this famous person.
He always has to hit the nepotism thing. Which is fine because guess what? I'm pretty proud of being married to my wife. So,
there you go.
And please say that every time because she's an incredible legislator, and better than that, she's an incredible mom and wife. So please say it every single time. I'm good with that.
There you go. And then you go on to say,
and she wins campaigns.
She does win campaigns. Many people, many wins under her leadership. Can you actually hold an audience, grow an audience, and make it valuable? If that's the case, then I'm all for it. And then they go on to talk about my previous podcast, which was unceremoniously murdered by Majority Leader Ben Bowman. He takes some pot shots, and I just want to highlight this. Asking about the flood of GOP podcasts, Bowman jokingly estimated the new shows have dozens of listeners in every corner of the state. And I just want to remind Representative Bowman that when we had the Oregon Bridge, we also had dozens of listeners. And he goes on to say he wants to bring back the podcast to have, I assume, many dozens of listeners. He says one thing, though, that I thought was super interesting. He says, let me assure you, these are not Joe Rogan numbers that we're putting up. And I think that's sort of a little jab because Democrats, after they lost the presidential election, all freaked out. They're like, why didn't Kamala Harris go on Joe Rogan? And they think maybe the Joe Rogan podcast defeated them. So I think Ben is trying to go out there and say, hey, hold on. Just because Republicans have a lot of podcasts doesn't mean they're going to go win elections. And so he's trying to stomp on that concern, right? Because he's, heaven forbid Dirk write an article about Republicans one of these days, right?
Well, I don't know. I asked Dirk when he was interviewing me, which that was a podcast in and of itself. I mean, him and I were having some fun, and I was taking some pawn shots at Dirk about OPB.
Did he publish any of those?
No, I don't think so. He pulled a couple of quotes, but he's got all the audio. Maybe sometime we'll have to release the audio of, because Ben said the same thing, that he said a bunch of stuff like, he's taking some shots at you, some fun stuff, right? And
I'm going to file a public records request for all OPB's emails because they're publicly funded. So shouldn't it be subject to public records?
I doubt it. They might claim privilege.
Oh,
I think, the Joe Rogan thing is it's funny. And I know Ben was being tongue in cheeky, I'm sure, with Dirk, and it's just the way he is. And I was as well, because I think it's wonderful that Republicans are doing podcasts. And I said that they all should have. It's just reaching your constituents. Now, whether it's your people at home that are listening to your podcast or other people outside, but it's just like putting a newsletter out. I mean, so they should do it. And if they enjoy talking
Yeah.
It's a way of putting it out. Now, a lot of them, my whole point was, and I think Dirk hit it there, and you and I have talked about this, they are not willing to say the things that you and I are willing to say.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that they don't think it or that they won't. It's just those podcasts, that's where the entertainment value has to come into play. Like if you listen to other, like Joe Rogan is going to be entertaining, right? Kamala Harris interview with Joe Rogan would have been a effing train wreck. Like there's no way Kamala Harris goes on there for 2 hours and sounds intelligent and forthcoming and kind of funny like Trump did. There's no way. And I would have paid money to hear that, because Joe Rogan would have just ate her lunch and just letting her eat herself. And that it really wouldn't have made a difference. It probably would have made things really worse. And I know that's why the Kamala Harris team didn't let her go on Joe Rogan, because they were like, there's no way this woman can go on here for 2 hours, 3 hours and talk to this dude about anything and everything, because there is no control when you're on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? You're talking and he's recording for 3 hours, and it's impossible. So
because he's going to ask questions, they're not going to be filtered questions. He's going to ask for follow up after she, throws her word salad out there, and that's why I do think it's so entertaining.
And our guys are doing. I think it's a fun space for them to get into, and I'm glad they're doing it. I think they should do more of it, and only if that's what they like doing. I think other legislators like writing newsletters, right, and putting those out and writing long form, kind of stuff and doing it that way. That's just another way of putting your information out there. And I think at the end of the day, podcast, it's just a simpler way. Now, I don't think you need to spend $35,000 on a studio, but I think he never put that in there, but he's mentioned that to me, and I said I think Reagan and I are in about $200 or $300.
Yeah, well, and
with these fancy microphones we're recording on now,
that costs $35.
Yeah,
but I do think that Oregon Doge video production is some of the best video production I've seen. It looks really, really good. I think the overarching point for the Republicans on podcasts is exactly the one you made, which is not everybody has, let's say, the personality to have a podcast. And so maybe you're better in written form, or maybe you're better in one-on-ones, or maybe you're better. Just use the medium that works for you, right? Don't feel the pressure to have a podcast because everybody else has a podcast. I still have a suspicion that as soon as we get out of session, all these podcasts will go dormant for months. And that doesn't help you build your listenership. That crushes your listenership. It is hard enough, and Bowman mentioned this, hard enough to do it weekly, right? And consistently show up every single time. And even, we're pretty good. We're a little spotty just because we get tired. Because it's exhausting to do this along with your legislative work, along with your, I'm still trying to make sure I pick up food for the chickens on the way home, which is what I did yesterday, right? Keep your cows fed, right? Watch your son do golf and place 10.
Yeah, I had to miss which was a good podcast, by the way, with Nigel.
Yeah.
Earlier this week, I had to miss it because I was, watching my son play state golf, and you got to do those things as a parent. I only get to do it maybe once. I don't know if he makes it next year, so I'm not going to miss those things for our podcast.
Absolutely.
That's why we don't publish every Thursday at 3:00. And these other guys that do it for a living, they can do that, right? They can say, here's exactly when and where. And I think the same with Doge and these other guys. It's going to be a little more ad hoc-ish, which is fine, but it's not, if you're really trying to build a listenership, it's not the way to do it. The way you build listenerships, I mean, the Howard Stern model, I mean, all these guys that did is, it's very specific, this time frame, this day of the week, every single time. Like consistency is the only way you can build a big listenership, right? And I think it's and Joe Rogan is he's a one-off. He hit a stride when everybody was in COVID, and then he was like this new thing. And then he just hit into this, he tapped into something that's brand new. So Joe Rogan can do things differently. But like Megyn Kelly's podcast is very driven by her doing it every single time. So
yes. And I think also you and I have always done this because the goal is to have fun. It's not really, we just have fun doing this, and we have the conversations, and our goal at Crosstabs really is to bring those conversations that everybody's having, like you're talking about the politicians, everybody is having in these rooms. It's just not public. And we're kind of taking more of those conversations public so people know what's happening behind the scenes. So I really enjoyed doing that with you, Brian.
Yeah, me too. It's been fun. I think we'll continue, and we might pick up some more podcasts as we race to the finish line here, because things are going to get interesting, and we might have to go to the microphones, Reagan, every day.
Just a quick 15-minute hit, right?
Yeah, stay tuned.
So, and no other podcast really has an AI-generated song like ours. I mean, that's something that we alone kind of
that's
really,
so awesome.
Really
dancing on the Senate floor. We'll leave it with that song again. How about that, Reagan?
I never object to playing it again. Never.
Have a great Memorial Weekend.
You too.
Walking down these marble halls today, got a bill, I wanna make it sway. People talking left and right, but we're gonna do this thing tonight. Oh, yeah. Time to make a move, can't afford to lose. Got the votes to prove what we're gonna do. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, 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 yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. Representatives and senators meet, trading words to find the perfect beat. Committee hearings all day long, till we finally sing the same song. Oh, yeah. Amendments flying high, watch them pass on by. Gotta give and try, make this bill fly. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, la, yeah, yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. When the votes align, and the count is right. Feel that Oregon pride, as we pass it tonight. We're dancing